Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Tom Singer and Craig Brown.
This is the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Hey, everybody, welcome back. And thank you for coming along on the journey of this show that we designed to be a resource for those who have careers in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, go visit our website. Visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Tom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show, most weeks with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. But about once a month, I'm here by myself doing a show with somebody who can bring you direct career advice on how you as an individual inside your company can build your career. We're not as technical when Craig isn't here, but we give you meat that you can put into action instantly so that you can set yourself up for the next promotion, the next job change, and just to thrive in everything that you're doing. Every single week, we try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all of our listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today is no different. Today, we have my friend, Trevor Blondeel. Hey, Trevor, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Excited to be here, Tom.
So Trevor is somebody who I met through the National Speakers Association. And this is a trade association for people who use the spoken word as part of their career. And as you know, because you listen to me here, that's how I make a big chunk of my living is speaking. And Trevor speaks, and he also does training and coaching specifically in the manufacturing space. So what he does is he connects manufacturing leaders and engineering groups from the top to the shop floor. And he does this by speaking and training to companies and associations. And he is really smart and he's really good at it. And so when I met him, I'm like, you got to come on my podcast and share just a little bit of your brilliance. So that's what we're going to do today. So Trevor, let's just get started. Can you tell me a little bit about your background? How did you become this expert who can connect the top to the shop floor?
Well, certainly not because I was born smart, but I have made a lot of mistakes in my career working in manufacturing and spending 25 years and having an engineering mindset and a business mindset and, really working through this exciting manufacturing life cycle and realizing that, hey, I was actually in a people business. And the more I worked on the people side, because I just didn't have that skill. And when I realized, hey, it's a skill, it's not something that you're born with. That is a myth, because I'm living proof, because I was often called a bull in a china shop, to get those parts out the door. And that's not something that I'm proud of, but it's something that I'm grateful for, because I had to make those mistakes to get here and have the privilege to serve our manufacturing community.
Well, I thought today we would talk about one of the things that you specialize in when you're in doing training or speaking. You talk about how you show up actually has a real impact on all aspects of your career. So I wanted to talk today about how all of our listeners show up in their career and what does that really mean? And I guess my first question is, how does showing up even matter to somebody who is kind of in that engineering world? What do you mean how they show up? I thought being an engineer, I thought you just had to come up and show up by delivering great product. What do you mean how you show up matters?
When I work with a lot of the engineers, they're very smart. Like I've never met a successful engineer that didn't know what he was talking about technically. It makes our world turn. It starts everything, and have lots of interactions and sometimes confrontations based on a mindset of, hey, a lot of engineers are right all the time in their own mind, and sometimes the ones that are able to flex their thoughts more, be a little more curious, are the ones that really excel and can not only show up better themselves, but they make people around them show up as their best selves just by how they're showing up. Because how we show up impacts on how people feel. And how we make people feel determines the extent to which they're going to engage with us. And feelings is not something that is embraced on most situations. We really got to go back to the science and the data of like, why does showing up matter? And there's enough information out there now, and we hear this term psychological safety, but really for engineering mindsets and innovation, the more we're laughing and the more we're comfortable with each other. Now, I'm not saying that we're out there just having fun, not getting results. It's meaning that we're in a good environment where we can safely really challenge each other. And how we challenge each other is sometimes the key, or sometimes for the engineering is how we accept that challenge.
So, it's interesting. You talk about, the feelings. When I started in my business career 35 plus years ago, you didn't bring your feelings to work, and how you felt. Your boss didn't care how you felt. So when you talk about feelings, that's changed. That's sort of newer in the business world, while how both you feel and how you make other people feel, that's important, but that's newer, right? Or has that always been there?
No, I mean, I wrote it on my board before, and I had leave your emotions at the door. We have work to do. Why would I need to do that, right? Like we know it's clear objective of where this life cycle needs to go, and we just need to figure out how to get there. So let's not talk about what's going on at home or how you're feeling today. Let's just get down to it. But the reality is we're not a different person when we come to work, right? We didn't switch bodies or minds. We're still in that same state. And people want to feel connected. And how do you make people feel? How do you connect with people? You connect with people when you make them feel seen, heard, and valued. And how do you even get there? Well, that comes through dialogue, right? So you got to have a conversation, right? Because we know a lot. People really don't know. People don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care about them, right? About their purpose. They understand. We even have alignment on why we're doing this. Yeah, we better talk about that through a little bit more, because if not, otherwise, this is just another task. And why would I go above and beyond when I don't even really know who you are and you don't even really know who I am?
Now you're getting into my area of expertise, right? Because when I go and speak, I talk about how do you build a stronger inner circle? Why does your network matter? And how do you connect with people for the long term? Because the truth is, a lot of people, especially, I know because I've talked to a lot of the listeners of the show, the networking side, they're like, they have preconceived notions that networking side, that human connection, they think I have to go to some sort of a company function or some sort of a chamber of commerce thing where there's going to be stale cheese and cheap wine. But if you look up the definition of what it is to build sort of a social business network, nowhere does it talk about cheap wine or stale cheese or shoving business cards in people's hands. If you really look at it, the definition is it's the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between two or more people where everyone involved in those relationships finds more success than they would without them. And the thing to remember is one of the ways that humans, build relationships, it's through community and collaboration. And in order to get to that feeling of community and to have collaboration, you really have to be a whole person. You can't live in a silo. You can't be, marry one at work and marry two at home. You're Mary everywhere you go, and you have to be willing to bring all those pieces of it with you. Are we on the same page here?
Absolutely. It's the vulnerability part is another. Vulnerability and feelings, a couple of words that don't like to be talked about, but they're really the answer to unlocking, because the old school sometimes way of working together is let's put pressure on each other and go in hard and put some tension in there and almost feel a little threatened. And I'd say to a leader, I'd say, they probably feel threatened for their job, right? And he said, yeah, I hope so, because I want to make sure that they know this deadline is important. I said, okay, let's hold on a minute. Let's talk about that, because the way our brains work, when we feel threatened, that's that old fight or flight. And they're going to be narrowed and limiting, and you want them to be creative, but you're the problem. It's how you're showing up is impacting on how they feel. So if you're frustrated that they're not getting the results, you need to look in the mirror. And when things are going well, then you look out the window, at them and what they're doing. But right now, it's the mirror, my friend, because if you can show up in such a way that you make others around you feel seen, feel connected, then their brains are broadening and building. And that's just the positive feeling effect, right? So this isn't about petting puppies and having picnics. It's not about that. It's just about having that positive mindset that, we're going to figure out how to design this product, and we're going to figure it out together. And we don't have it right now, and it's going to be hard, but we're all in this together.
All right. So I like puppies and picnics, but I get what you're saying. So you know what I like? I like real world examples. When I have people and we interview and we do this, it's great to share all these concepts and science and this and that. But Give me a story. Give me a real world example of why this matters and how to put it into practice.
It doesn't always work out, Tom, but sometimes if we're willing to try something different to get a different result, sometimes it does. And there's a recent client I worked with, and the plant manager is an engineer, and I'm working with an engineer, and they got a problem with another engineer. So our audience can relate to this. And, we talk about different things as far as, actually, Craig was talking to Mark about software. And, do we have enough software, not enough software in a previous episode?
I got to jump in. I love the fact that you've listened to other episodes of the Digital Enterprise Society, and you can actually quote Craig and Mark in one of their battles. That's awesome.
Hey, you introduced me to it, and it's like, hey, anything, it's all got different sorts of information. So I think very differently from them, and I can tell just from their language, right? And I don't have the expertise that they have. But when I'm listening, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I get the fact that we do need certain software and we do need certain systems. And whether it's more software or less software, depending on how those two debate, I can't answer that. What I can answer is that we do need some systems on the side. And as Craig explained, he kind of said, the reason that we need more software is because there's redundant tasks. And then those redundant tasks, people aren't as engaged. So it kind of goes along with everything that we're saying. Now, the next step to talk to Craig about is that as they have more time, we're going to have more human interaction. There's going to be less engineers sitting at a computer, and there's going to be more interaction. And we're already seeing this now. So a client I was working with, and he's an engineering manager, and one of the engineers was really struggling in the group. Well, this really intelligent employee person spent a lot of time designing, right? And problem solving, working on equipment. And now all of a sudden things have shifted, and there's a lot of personal interaction. And he doesn't understand why people don't understand what he understands. Like, why don't they get it? And then how he's showing up is impacting how others are feeling, which is, I'm not helping this dude out. Like, he's just made me upset, and I don't want to engage now. Problem is that there's so much expertise. So what do we got to do here? And we had some great conversations and saying, well, what do you want to try different? I said, well, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell him that he needs to do this. And if he doesn't do this, this is going to happen. And I'm like, whoa, hold on the brakes here for a minute. Can we talk about this? And we start talking through a different scenario of, what if we just ask questions like, hey, man, what's going on? Like, what's triggering this? And asking questions instead of saying what you need. Like, we don't really care what the boss needs. But if you can talk me through it and switch from saying what you need to saying, hey, man, what happened out there? And, why did you, what happened when you responded that way? And just get some dialogue. And it comes back to the dialogue again and connecting. Because it's like, hey, man, I care about you. You could start off with, hey, you're a really smart guy, and we really appreciate what you do. But how do you feel on how that just went out there on the shop floor? Well, not very good. Okay, well, let's talk about that. What's another approach you could take? If they're not understanding, what could you do different? And that whole conversation, and I'll summarize this story for our listeners, but the bottom line is, you go from doing a performance improvement plan on someone to just having dialogue and them understanding, and you're coaching them, because in this person's defense, they just haven't had enough time shooting the basketball, right? The great basketball players shoot many practice shots. And if we allow the person, we coach them, and we can accelerate their career, well, all of a sudden, you've just created this ambassador for your employee, this ambassador for your plant.
So one of the things I noticed in that story is the person was frustrated because other people didn't understand him and what he knew. And he was like frustrated because of that. So I have a question. Do we often show up in business and we're really quick to be able to judge other people and say, oh, I see how they show up, maybe positively, like, oh, they show up as a great leader, or they show up as a great teammate, or often maybe the negative side is they show up self-centered, or they show up this other way. But do people just in general have trouble starting to understand how they show up? Because we're pretty quick to know who everybody else on the team is and how they're showing up. Is there a missing mirror? Do most people go in not knowing how they themselves show up?
That is the starting point. It's just recognizing, like, what impact do I have on other people? If one listener today goes in, and you want to take one takeaway from this podcast today, is ask someone that interacts with you on a regular basis and just say, how am I showing up? Like, how am I impacting the group? Like, when I walk into the room and start talking or engaging, are people excited? Right? Are they welcoming my input? Am I making others better when I do show up? Because I don't try to bring it up too much, the emotional intelligence side, but really it's a skill, and we can all learn it. It doesn't matter, how your background was developed. It's just a skill you can start at any point in time. And it just enables us to better perceive, understand, and reason with our emotions and the emotions of others to get productive outcomes. So it does start with self-awareness. And it's the easiest part is just saying, man, how am I impacting? Well, it's just Trevor, right? He's just kind of like that. Well, hold on a minute. What does that mean? It's just Trevor. I don't want to be just Trevor. I want to be someone that, people are welcome to have around here, and I make the team better.
Okay, so two things come to mind. Number one, isn't that a little scary to go to somebody and say, how do I show up? How do I impact this team? Because if they say, well, you're just Trevor, or worse, you suck the energy out of the room when you come to a meeting. Yeah. I mean, are we prepared to hear something that's either not positive or even possibly negative? Like, isn't that scary for people?
It is. And it's humbling, and it's not everybody can do it. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that you're listening today, you have an opportunity to accelerate your career and separate from the average, because it does change lives, right? You cannot have courage without vulnerability, because it takes courage to do what you're talking about, Tom. And there's a risk in there. And because I had some people I worked with, it's kind of like, okay, I know not to give that person feedback because they made it very clear. Because if you ask the question, here's part 2 of the takeaway today. If you can gather up that courage that we're talking about, the next most important thing is your response to whatever they say. If they say what Tom said and they say, the meeting goes away when you go in and everybody gets quiet, you only get to say 2 words, thank you. And you just got to walk away. Because if you start with a word like but or because, and you start explaining it, you're going to shut down that feedback again. So it's hard, but you just got to take it in a step. And then when they say, oh man, I didn't see myself that way, walk away, take 24 hours, absorb it, and just take it from there.
Well, that leads me to the second question. The first question is, what if I'm scared to ask? The second part is, what do I do when I get the feedback? So your first answer is fine. Step back, take 24 hours. Then what do they do?
You got to have somebody that you do trust, right? Somebody that you're closer to, that that cares about you. Because if you do it with someone that maybe you're not as close to and you haven't worked as much, you may feel like in such a way that you won't do anything with it, right? Because you're going to start telling yourself a story that it's their issue. If you go to someone that you truly care about, and then they give you that feeling that, oh, they care about me and they're just being honest, you can just do that kind of on the side and say, hey, Tom, the next time we're on the shop floor and I do that, or I make that face, can you just kind of give me a little elbow? Because this is pretty hard for me to even digest. So just start small with an accountability partner, someone that's vested in your career. And it's amazing. This is magic. When even someone that's been frustrated with you, or maybe something that's not going the right way, when you just show an ounce of vulnerability and say, I need a little bit of help, it's amazing what a wonderful world this can be and how helpful your peers can be.
All right. So we started this by saying today's show was going to be about how you show up and how it impacts your career. So if I'm able to get some real feedback, and if I'm strong enough and open enough to hear it, and then if I'm willing to go back and change the way I show up. So the next time, maybe not the next time, this probably takes practice and things to learn these skills. But as I go through and learn these skills and I show up using that term, I show up better for my team. What does that really mean for my career?
It's the game changer, because people think, oh, well, I've done so well with this product design and this life cycle, and my boss really is happy with that, so I'm good, right? No, it's a 360 circle around you, right? Are you making your peers better? Are you developing people around you that they say, hey, we want Tom on our team just because he elevates the group? We're the average of the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with. And if you want to be surrounded with great people to make yourself better, you just got to continue to build off that. So you may get promoted, and you will see people get promoted and have great careers in spite of not having those skills. And because I get that question, it's like, Trevor, I know some real jerks that are high up in organizations.
I was thinking the same thing, is that, there's a lot of jerks who get to the top.
But hey, as Craig said, as the software keeps on developing and the digital enterprise keeps on growing, these skills are only going to elevate. They're only going to become more important because you're not going to be able to hide behind spreadsheets and scientific problem solving, because we're going to have hard conversations, and you only get good at them at practicing. And yes, you can read good books. There's amazing podcasts. There's great speakers. There's great coaches. And that's all going to accelerate things, but you got to practice and you got to be open about it. You got to say, hey, I'm trying to figure this out and I want to have a greater impact on our team. At the end of a meeting, when you say, if you facilitate it, say, how'd this go? What would have made the meeting better, right? Like, and you got to dig in a little bit because, oh, good. Yeah, everything's good. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I went to work and I asked everybody and they said everything's good. I said, okay, so you got a one-word answer with a 3-word question. You got to dig deep, man, if really want to know.
So this brings up an interesting thing, because as a speaker, I talk to a lot of people who speak a lot, either in their industry or in their company, or sometimes, who speak for money, who, when I say, how do you know you're good? And they say, well, I know I'm good because everybody comes up to me afterwards and says, great speech. And I say, you know what? We live in a polite society. What else are you going to say to somebody? We've all had a boss who's a mediocre speaker. The company has brought in trainers, obviously not you or me, who have been mediocre. And if we get in the elevator and it's just the speaker, we go, hey, great speech today. Because we're not going to say, by the way, that was a total waste of my hour, because that's not who we are as a society, right? We live in a polite society. So my question is, it's great if you go and ask for this feedback from your team or from someone on the team who you trust. How do you know you're getting real feedback, Trevor?
Well, somebody says that you're all good, then you know that's not good feedback. Because if they care about you, we've all got it. Like, I've been studying this forever. Daniel Goleman coined emotional intelligence in 1995. He's still growing. Like, we're all in this together. And when I coach someone, like this individual in the situation with their engineer, I learned so much from that engineer that told me how he went through this process, right? And yes, we kind of coached together through that, but he's the one that did it, right? It's the heavy lifting. And so if someone says, I really want to kind of get to this level in my career, is there anything I can do? And it's like, no, man, you're doing good. Everything's great. And it's kind of like, no, like there's something, and I know there is. So either you're not being honest with me or you're just not paying attention, because we all got it. It makes us together, right? We all have that in common. We're in this together.
So earlier you made a comment that quoted the famous quote by Jim Rohn that is, hey, when it comes to your character and who you are sort of as a person, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, sometimes we get to pick those people, and sometimes they're assigned. And I know that when I've used that quote, there's people who've come up to me and go, uh-oh, because one of the people in my group, I spend a lot of time with them. We work on projects together. They're kind of put in whatever word you want that's a negative word there. They're kind of a jerk. They're kind of whatever. How do you make sure you're around the right people so their good traits, their positive traits rub off on you?
I'll go back to that scenario that we just brought up with the engineer coaching the other engineer. And I said, what else? Here I am learning again from my client. I said, what else made this really successful? Because this guy turned around, but it doesn't always happen that way. He says, one of the things that we did was that I think made a difference is I went and talked to the plant manager and the HR manager. And then the individual wanted to talk to the plant manager and the HR manager as well, right? Well, we were all aligned, right? So, but that took some dialogue. Like, they invested a lot of time. But, there's numbers out there, like to replace like a top engineer at their plant could be up to $100,000 in cost, right? To hire someone and train and develop. And there's some deep technical knowledge there. Well, they invested a lot of their time up front, and that creates that alignment. So if one of them really wasn't on board, that dialogue's got to come out. And then there's 2 ways that's going to go. Fortunately, in this individual and this plant is that there was an open mindset, a growth mindset to say, because they already pulled the trigger on a performance improvement plan. And I asked them, I said, what if they just slapped the old PIP down and said, hey, okay, you're on a PIP and you got 90 days to do this. And he's like, I don't know if he'd be here. Because right away that goes into the fact of I'm on my way out. Because I said to them, if I sat down with this person today and I looked in the eye, I said, hey, how's it going? Are they going to reply and say that, hey, I'm on my way out? Like I'm on the verge of getting fired? Well, no. Okay, well, then we need to have more dialogue. So going back to that one person, you got to get them on board. You got to have those hard conversations and saying, okay, Tom, why do you think this tip needs to be dropped today? Right? Have we done everything to have that conversation? And then if you have 3 or 4 out of the 5, you need to see, do your core values line up to where you're working? That becomes a bigger conversation.
So Trevor, what kind of organizations hire you to come in and do training and coaching for their teams? What type of situation is it that they say, we need to bring someone in to help us with these issues as a team?
Great organizations. But people say, Trevor, I know this manufacturing place, they're a hot mess and you need to get over there. I'm like, yeah, that's probably not going to work. And those organizations don't bring me in because they already know all the answers, right? So it's smart organizations that recognize that, hey, we're really good at developing this product. We have some really great people, but there's some underlying issues here where we're not connecting as we should, because the intention of the owner or that CEO is like, hey, I want people to be treated like this. Well, somewhere down the line, the team member on the floor, which is the most important person in the organization, which is a subject matter expert, is not getting the same message or not being treated that same way. Or when they bring up a safety issue, even a small one, it's not getting the same level of attention as the intention is for that. So the organization usually has the growth mindset, and then they just want to increase that skill. They're already successful. They're good. They want to be great. And for your individual career, if you're listening today, it's, when water goes to boiling, it's just a couple degrees. It turns it from water to vapor. And I find it's the same thing in these skill sets. It's just changing your words slightly, and how, why is this equipment down, as opposed to help me understand what's going on here, how you show up.
So Trevor, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I got to know more about Trevor Blondeel, how do they find you?
They find me at operationskickstart.com, and lots of great information there, and some great episodes on Mindfulness Manufacturing Podcast.
Awesome. That's what we like to do here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, is advertise other manufacturing podcasts. No, that's not true. We are big fans of all the podcasts that are out there. So definitely check out Trevor's site at operationkickstart.com, and also check out his podcast because he does great stuff. Heck, I was a guest on his podcast about a month ago.
And we got great reviews. Appreciate that, Tom.
Nice. It was great. Well, Trevor, thank you for joining us here with the audience. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. I'll tell you what, every single week, we're going to bring to you more thoughts, ideas, and actionable information around your career in product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check out the website at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.